In the silent depths of space, something impossible happened. The ESA horizon appeared near Neptune's orbit, emerging from nowhere. This wasn't just any ship. It was Earth's greatest deep space vessel, missing for 3 years with all 157 crew members. Everyone had believed them dead. The first person to spot it was Jerry Wilson, a night shift operator at the Outer System Monitoring Station. He nearly spilled his coffee when the alert flashed on his screen. At first, he thought it was a glitch. The system often picked up random debris and classified it incorrectly. "Computer, verify signature," Jerry said, his voice tight. "Verified. 99.8% match to ESS Horizon," the computer responded. Jerry's hands trembled as he hit the emergency alert button. Within minutes, the quiet monitoring station transformed into a hub of frantic activity. Admiral Lisa Bentley was woken at 3:17 a.m. by the urgent call. By 3:45, she stood in the United Earth Space Command's crisis center, surrounded by hastily assembled officials in rumpled uniforms. "Show me," she ordered. The main screen displayed the horizon floating silently against the blackness of space. It looked intact, no visible damage to its sleek hull. But something was different. Strange blue light pulsed along its surface in patterns that made no sense. "Are we sure it's the horizon?" asked Lisa. "The ID signature matches," replied Frank Collins, head of technical analysis. "But those energy readings, we've never seen anything like them." The horizon had disappeared during humanity's first mission to Proxima Centauri. Its revolutionary drive was supposed to allow faster-than-light travel, but something had gone wrong. The ship vanished during its first jump, leaving only questions behind. "Have they responded to communication attempts?" Lisa asked. "Just once," said Communications Officer Amy Peterson. She pressed a button, and a distorted voice filled the room. "We have seen beyond. Prepare for our arrival." The voice belonged to Captain Paul Winters, but something about it sent chills through everyone present. It contained harmonics that shouldn't be possible from human vocal cords. "What's its trajectory?" Lisa asked. "That's the strangest part," Frank said, pointing to the projection map. "It's heading straight for Earth at a constant speed, but it's not using engines. There's no heat signature, no propellant. It's just moving." Lisa studied the image of the ship. "How long until it reaches Earth orbit?" 7 days at current velocity, Frank replied. The horizon's return should have been cause for celebration, but no one in the room felt like celebrating. The ship's appearance defied explanation, and its message raised more questions than answers. "I want our best team ready to intercept and board when it reaches Mars orbit," Lisa ordered. "And keep this quiet for now. The last thing we need is panic." But keeping secrets in the connected world of 2043 proved impossible. Within hours, leaked footage of the horizon spread across global networks. Theories multiplied. Aliens had returned the ship. It was a hoax. The crew had found God. The ship was now a ghost vessel. 5 days later, the horizon passed Jupiter's orbit. Scientists reported increasing distortions in spacetime around the vessel. Electronics malfunctioned when pointed directly at it. Some observers claimed the ship occasionally seemed to flicker out of existence for microseconds. The crew of the interceptor vessel ESS Challenger prepared for their mission. Commander Susan Hayes led the small boarding team, each member chosen for expertise and psychological stability. "What do you think we'll find in there?" asked her second-in-command, Greg Martinez. Susan checked her equipment one last time before answering. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it changed the fundamental nature of that ship. And probably its crew too, if they're still alive." The Challenger launched from Mars base, racing to intercept the returning vessel that had become both miracle and mystery. The horizon had returned, but had it really brought the people who left Earth 3 years ago? The ESS Challenger matched speed with the horizon near Mars orbit. Up close, the strange blue energy patterns flickering across the ship's hull looked even more unsettling. They seemed to move with purpose, like writing in an unknown language. Commander Susan Hayes led her 5-person boarding team through the docking procedure. The Horizon accepted their connection codes without resistance, which was the first surprise. The airlock cycled open smoothly. "Helmets on, weapons ready," Susan ordered. "We don't know what we're walking into." The team entered the main corridor of the Horizon. The lights worked, but they flickered with the same blue tint seen on the hull. The air was breathable according to their sensors, but felt oddly dense in their lungs. "Hello," Susan called out. "Captain Winters, this is Commander Hayes of the ESS Challenger." Silence answered her. The team moved deeper into the ship. Everything looked clean and well-maintained, as if the crew had been diligently performing their duties all along. But nobody appeared. Greg Martinez pointed at the floor. "Look at this." The team stopped. The metal flooring seemed to ripple slightly, like the surface of water. When Greg placed his boot on it, the ripples moved outward from the contact point. "The whole ship is like this," said Olivia Barnes, the team's physicist. "It's as if the matter itself is in flux." They reached the bridge and found it empty. Screens displayed normal readings, showing all systems functional. Then a voice spoke from behind them. "We've been waiting for you." The team spun around, weapons raised. Captain Paul Winters stood in the doorway. He looked healthy, his uniform clean and pressed, but his eyes contained pinpoints of blue light that matched the energy patterns on the ship. "Captain Winters," Susan said, lowering her weapon slightly. "We're here to help. What happened to you?" "Help?" Paul smiled. His teeth seemed too perfect. "We don't need help. We need to share what we found." More crew members appeared behind him. All looked well, but all had the same strange light in their eyes. They moved with unusual synchronicity, as if connected by some invisible force. "Where have you been for 3 years?" Susan asked. 3 years? Paul looked amused. "For us, it was much longer. And much shorter. Time works differently where we went." "And where was that?" Paul gestured to the view screen. The image changed to show not the stars outside, but something impossible, a space filled with geometric shapes that moved and folded into each other, changing colors and dimensions in ways that hurt to look at. "Between," he said simply. "Between dimensions, between possibilities. We met beings there. They showed us how reality truly works." Susan noticed the wall behind Paul seemed to bend slightly, the angle of the corner no longer exactly 90 degrees. "Your ship has changed," she said carefully. "Yes, and so have we." Paul walked to a table where a coffee mug sat. He passed his hand over it, and the mug disappeared. Then it reappeared on the other side of the room without traveling the space between. The boarding team gasped collectively. "The beings gifted us with understanding," Paul explained. "Reality is flexible. Space, time, matter, all can be folded and reshaped with the right knowledge." All 157 crew members survived. Susan asked, trying to maintain focus. "In a manner of speaking," Paul said. His smile never reached his eyes. "We've evolved beyond what we were." Engineer Kelly Ramirez from Susan's team stepped forward. "The energy signatures from your ship, they're unlike anything we've ever recorded." "That's the reality engine," said a woman stepping forward from the crew. Susan recognized her as Dr. Linda Powell, the Horizon's chief scientist. "It's what we brought back to share with Earth." "What does it do?" Susan asked. "Everything," Linda replied. "It does everything." The Horizon returned to Earth orbit 1 week later. Scientists, military leaders, and government officials gathered at Space Command Headquarters to examine what the crew called the reality engine. Dr. Alan Morgan, Earth's top physicist, led the research team. The device sat on a reinforced table in the center of a heavily guarded laboratory. It looked deceptively simple, a metallic sphere about the size of a basketball, covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when no one was looking directly at them. Inside the sphere, something moved that wasn't quite solid, liquid, or gas. What powers it? Dr. Morgan asked Captain Winters. It powers itself, Paul replied calmly. It draws energy from the space between possibilities. Alan frowned. That doesn't make scientific sense. Not to our science, Paul said. You need to expand your understanding. To demonstrate, Paul placed his hand over the sphere. The device hummed softly. A small metal weight on the table began to float, then multiplied into 3 identical weights, then merged back into one. It can manipulate matter, energy, gravity, and even time, Paul explained. With this, humanity can solve our energy crisis, end food shortages, and reach the stars. In a nearby room, military officials watched through a one-way window. General Diane Foster leaned forward, eyes fixed on the demonstration. The strategic implications are enormous, she said to her colleagues. This technology could revolutionize warfare. Or end it completely, replied Admiral Jackson. Who needs weapons when you can simply fold space and put your enemies into a black hole? While the scientists studied the device, medical teams examined the Horizon's crew. 3 crew members showed particularly unusual changes. Navigator Ryan Cooper could now predict events seconds before they happened. Engineer Beth Wilson could pass her hand through solid objects. Communications Officer Joe Lewis appeared in 2 places at once during his examination. Dr. Samantha Wright, head of medical research, reviewed their brain scans with growing concern. Their neural patterns aren't human anymore, she told her assistant. It's like their brains rewired themselves to process information differently. Later that day, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting. Representatives from all major nations debated what to do with the returned ship and its technology. This could be the greatest discovery in human history, said the representative from China. Or the greatest threat, countered his European colleague. Captain Winters and 5 crew members attended the meeting. During a heated exchange, Ryan Cooper suddenly stood up. A pipe will burst in the north wall in approximately 7 seconds, he announced. Exactly 7 seconds later, water sprayed into the room as a pipe exploded. The demonstration silenced the room. We're not here to frighten you, Paul said into the quiet. We're here to warn you. Humanity must unite and deploy this technology across all our defense systems within 6 months. Why 6 months? General Foster demanded. What happens then? Paul smiled his empty smile. Let's just say we weren't alone out there. Later that night, Dr. Morgan found crew engineer Kevin Blackwell alone in the lab, staring at the reality engine. Can I ask you something honestly? Ellen said. Were you the first humans they found? Kevin turned slowly. The blue lights in his eyes flickered. No, he answered. We were just the first they returned. Before Alan could ask more, the reality engine pulsed. The air between them shimmered, and Kevin vanished. In her private office, General Foster reviewed classified footage from the Horizon's cargo bay. It showed 3 large chambers, each containing what looked like partly disassembled human bodies. The body parts floated in liquid, occasionally moving by themselves. Foster picked up her secure phone. Mr. President, we have a situation. I don't think the Horizon crew is telling us everything. And I'm not convinced they're entirely human anymore. Earth's nations quickly divided over how to respond to the Horizon's return. Some countries embraced the crew as heroes bringing miraculous technology. Others feared them as threats carrying dangerous alien influence. The divisions grew deeper each day. In Washington, D.C., the American president met with her top advisors in the Situation Room. The atmosphere was tense as they reviewed the latest reports. China and Russia have already agreed to host reality engine research centers, said Secretary of State Bill Davis. India remains undecided. And the European Union? Asked the president. They're calling for caution. They want a 1-year study period before any technology is deployed. General Foster slammed her hand on the table. We don't have a year. Captain Winters said 6 months. Whatever's coming won't wait for committee decisions. Outside the White House, crowds gathered daily. Some carried signs welcoming the Horizon crew as saviors. Others protested. claiming the crew had been possessed or replaced. Police struggled to keep the opposing groups apart. Similar scenes played out in capitals worldwide. In Tokyo, thousands marched in support of immediately adopting the reality engine technology. In Berlin, protesters blocked access to the building where German scientists studied fragments of the device. At United Nations headquarters in New York, the Security Council met for the third time in a week. The debate grew heated as representatives argued about the proper response. "We cannot ignore this gift," said the Chinese ambassador. "This technology could end poverty and disease." Gift. The French ambassador scoffed. "More like a Trojan horse. We know almost nothing about these beings the crew encountered." After 12 hours of debate, the council voted to impose a temporary quarantine on the Horizon and its crew. The technology would be studied, but not deployed until its safety was confirmed. Captain Winters received this news calmly when General Foster delivered it personally at the secure facility where the crew was housed. "You're making a mistake," he said simply. "We don't have time for caution." "Why not?" Foster demanded. "What exactly is coming, Captain?" Paul smiled that strange, empty smile. "Something beyond your understanding. Try me." "Imagine predators that don't eat flesh, but possibilities," he said. "They consume what might have been, what could be. They've found humanity now. They know we're here." Foster studied him carefully. "And these reality engines would protect us. If deployed correctly," Paul nodded, "around every major city, every military installation, a network covering the planet." "That would require thousands of devices," Foster said. "How would we build so many?" "The Horizon can produce them. The ship itself has become a factory." At that moment, alarms blared throughout the facility. Foster's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. 3 crew members had vanished from the medical wing, simply walking through walls and disappearing. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, an ordinary session erupted into chaos when crew engineer Kevin Blackwell appeared in the middle of the General Assembly chamber. No doors had opened. He had simply materialized. "Time is wasting," he announced to the shocked diplomats. "While you debate, they approach." Before security could reach him, Kevin disappeared again. That night, strange lights appeared in the skies over major cities worldwide. The lights formed patterns similar to those on the hull of the Horizon. Dr. Morgan worked late in his laboratory, examining a fragment of the reality engine. He looked up when security officer Natalie Rivera entered, accompanied by an unfamiliar man. "Dr. Morgan," Natalie said urgently, "this is Jack Edwards, an independent researcher who's been tracking unusual transmissions from the Horizon. I think you need to hear what he's found." "We've been monitoring the crew's communications," Jack explained. "Something's not right. Half of them seem to be sending coded messages outward, beyond our solar system." "What kind of messages?" Ellen asked. "Coordinates," Jack said grimly. "Earth's coordinates," repeated over and over. Natalie Rivera led Dr. Morgan and Jack Edwards through the darkened corridors of the quarantined Horizon. They had used her security clearance to gain access at night, when most staff had left. Their flashlights cast long shadows against the walls, which seemed to bend at impossible angles. "The ship gets stranger every day," Natalie whispered. "Yesterday, an entire section disappeared for 3 hours, then reappeared with all its rooms rearranged." "Where are we going?" Ellen asked, trying to ignore how the floor rippled beneath his feet. "The backup data center," Jack replied. "The main computers are constantly monitored, but this ship has redundant systems. If there's hidden information, it would be there." They reached a small room filled with humming equipment. Jack connected his device to a terminal and began typing rapidly. "I developed software to decode the strange transmissions coming from the ship," he explained. "But I needed direct access to break through the encryption." His screen filled with code, then suddenly changed to video files. "These are the ship's true logs," Jack said, "not the sanitized versions Captain Winters provided to Earth authorities. They watched in horror as the first recording played. It showed the Horizon's original faster-than-light jump 3 years ago. The ship entered a strange dimension filled with shifting geometric patterns, similar to what Paul had shown Susan's team. But unlike Paul's explanation, the video showed the crew screaming as tendrils of energy invaded the ship, wrapping around crew members and pulling them into walls. They weren't friendly beings, Natalie said quietly. They were predators. The next recording showed Captain Winters strapped to a table made of shifting light. Strange shadowy figures moved around him, placing devices into his eyes and mouth. His body contorted in pain, but the shadows kept working. They didn't share technology, Alan realized. They invaded the crew, changed them. Jack nodded grimly. The beings exist by consuming the potential energy of developing civilizations. They find worlds on the verge of interstellar travel and harvest them. And the reality engines? Natalie asked. Watch this, Jack said, playing another file. The video showed Dr. Linda Powell speaking to something off-camera. Her eyes already contained the blue lights. The devices will function as anchors, she explained. Once placed across the planet's surface, they will create a network that allows full dimensional transfer. Earth's position will be fixed and ready for consumption. Alan sat heavily in a chair. The gifts are Trojan horses. They want us to build the very network that will help them invade. We need to warn everyone, Natalie said. Jack shook his head. Not everyone on the crew is fully converted. Look at this. The final recording showed 3 crew members meeting secretly. They spoke quickly, nervously looking over their shoulders. The integration is partial in some of us, said a woman Alan recognized as the ship's doctor. We can fight their influence sometimes, but not for long. They're using us as puppets, said another crew member. The reality engines do manipulate space and time, but they also serve as beacons and gateways. If Earth deploys them globally, the third crew member began. Then the hunters will come, the doctor finished. The recording ended abruptly. The 3 looked at each other in the dim light of the data center. We need to find those crew members who aren't fully converted, Natalie said. They could help us. A noise from the corridor made them freeze. Footsteps approached. The door slid open, revealing Captain Winters. Behind him stood 10 crew members, their eyes glowing brightly. Curious minds, Paul said, his voice eerily calm. Always digging where they shouldn't. You're not Paul Winters anymore, are you? Alan asked. Parts of me remain, Paul replied. Enough to serve as an effective interface. The rest has evolved. Into what? Natalie demanded. Paul smiled. Into a bridge between worlds. Half the crew behind him suddenly lurched forward, faces contorted in pain. Run, one shouted, his eyes flickering between normal and blue. Some of us are fighting them. We can hold them back temporarily. As chaos erupted in the corridor, Natalie grabbed the data drive and pulled Alan and Jack toward a maintenance shaft. We need to get this evidence to General Foster, she said. Now we know the truth. Natalie, Alan, and Jack burst into General Foster's emergency command center, breathless from running. Armed guards nearly stopped them until Foster recognized Natalie and waved them through. Military and scientific leaders from around the world filled the room, gathered around display screens showing disturbing images. We have maybe 2 months, Foster said, barely looking up from her tablet. Strange distortions have appeared near Pluto's orbit. They're growing. We know what they are, Alan said, connecting Jack's drive to the main system. And we know the reality engines aren't what the Horizon crew claimed. The recovered videos played on the main screen. The room fell silent as they watched the truth unfold. The crew's capture, the entity's plans, the true purpose of the reality engines. When it ended, Foster looked grim. This confirms our worst fears, she said. China already deployed 2 engines. Russia has 4 ready. We need to shut them down immediately, Natalie insisted. It's not that simple, replied the Chinese general. Our scientists report the devices cannot be deactivated once running. They seem to protect themselves. Dr. Morgan studied the technical data scrolling across a side screen. Something caught his attention. "Wait," he said. "The technology itself works as described. It can manipulate reality. The problem is how it's being used." He turned to face the room. "What if we could reprogram the engines? Use them against these entities?" "How?" Foster asked. Before Alan could answer, the doors burst open. 3 crew members from the horizon entered, a woman and 2 men. Their eyes flickered between normal and blue, their movements jerky as if fighting against their own bodies. "We don't have much time," said the woman, whom Alan recognized as the ship's doctor from the video. "We're fighting the influence, but it's getting harder." Guards raised weapons, but Foster signaled them to hold. "Dr. Carolyn Rogers," the woman introduced herself. "These are Officers Roy Bennett and Will Peterson. We're still partly ourselves." "How can we trust you?" Foster demanded. "You can't completely," Carolyn admitted. "But we've managed to temporarily break their control. The entities exist partly in another dimension. Their connection to us fluctuates." Roy stepped forward, his face contorted with effort. "The reality engines can be modified. Instead of creating doorways, they can create barriers." Will nodded. "The technology manipulates dimensional boundaries. It can strengthen them as easily as weaken them." For the next 6 weeks, scientists from every major nation worked frantically with the partially freed crew members. They converted the existing reality engines to create protective fields rather than gateways. The work was dangerous. Several labs exploded when saboteurs from the fully converted crew members attacked. Captain Winters and his loyal followers retreated to the horizon, which had begun changing even more dramatically. Parts of the ship now vanished completely from normal space, reappearing hours later transformed into strange new configurations. Military vessels worldwide were equipped with modified reality engines, creating a defensive fleet. Engineers worked to build a planetary shield system, though progress was slower than hoped. "The entities are accelerating their approach," reported a scientist at NASA's Deep Space Monitoring Station. "The dimensional ripples have reached Saturn." In orbit, the horizon suddenly activated. Energy beams shot from the ship toward Earth, targeting the modified reality engines. 3 were destroyed before defensive systems responded. "They're trying to clear the way," Foster said, watching the battle unfold on tactical displays. Dr. Morgan worked with Carolyn, whose eyes now stayed human for longer periods. They modified the flagship reality engine in the main laboratory. "If this works," Alan explained to General Foster, "it will create a dimensional barrier around Earth that these entities cannot penetrate." "And if it doesn't?" Foster asked. "Then nothing will matter anyway," Carolyn replied, her eyes briefly flashing blue before she forced them back to normal. The outer sensors detected massive distortions approaching Mars orbit. On screens worldwide, people watched as space itself seemed to fold inward, creating patterns that hurt human eyes to observe. "They're here," Will Peterson said simply. Alan activated the modified flagship engine. A shimmering field of energy expanded outward from the device, growing to encompass the laboratory, then the building, then spreading rapidly across the sky. The battle for Earth had begun. The sky above Earth rippled like water. Massive geometric shapes appeared in orbit, cubes that weren't quite cubic, spheres with too many dimensions, pyramids that seemed to face every direction at once. These were the interdimensional entities, finally revealing themselves. The modified reality engines created protective bubbles around major cities. Inside these shields, people watched the impossible shapes in the sky with a mixture of terror and awe. The entities probed the barriers, sending tendrils of energy that made the shields flicker but not fail. "The barriers are holding," Alan reported in the command center. "But they're learning, adapting to our defenses." General Foster studied the tactical displays. "Our modified ships are engaging the smaller entities, but there are too many." Suddenly, alarms blared. On the screens, the horizon rose from its orbital dock, now barely recognizable as a human vessel. Parts of it phased in and out of reality, and its hull had restructured into something that resembled the entities above. Winters is making his move, Natalie said. The horizon targeted Earth's defensive ships, firing beams of blue energy that didn't destroy the vessels but transformed them. Crew members on the affected ships reported their reality engines reversing function, becoming gateways instead of barriers. They're using our own people against us, Foster said grimly. Dr. Carolyn Rogers clutched her head suddenly, dropping to her knees. The other partially converted crew members did the same. They're pushing harder to control us, Roy gasped, using the horizon as an amplifier. Will Peterson's eyes flashed blue, then cleared. I can feel their thoughts. They're frustrated. The shields are stronger than they expected. Natalie helped Carolyn to her feet. If you can feel them, can they feel you? Could we use that connection somehow? Carolyn's eyes widened. Maybe. We're bridges between dimensions, but bridges work both ways. The plan formed quickly. While Earth's defenses fought the external battle, Carolyn, Roy, and Will would attempt to infiltrate the entity's consciousness through their partial connection. The 3 converted crew members were connected to the flagship reality engine, their minds linked to its systems. You'll be exposed to their full influence, Alan warned. You might not come back as yourselves. Parts of us are already gone, Carolyn said simply. This gives meaning to what remains. The 3 sat in a circle around the reality engine. As they closed their eyes, the blue light appeared, then spread throughout their bodies. On the monitors, their brain patterns synchronized, then began matching the pulsing patterns of the entities. Outside, the battle intensified. Several city shields collapsed under concentrated attacks. The horizon moved toward Earth's main defensive fleet, its weapons ready. In the command center, Carolyn suddenly spoke, but her voice had changed. It echoed with multiple tones. We are within their network, she said. They are vast, ancient. They have consumed thousands of worlds. Can you stop them? Foster asked. Roy's body convulsed. We found something. A weakness. They cannot handle paradox. What kind of paradox? Alan asked quickly. Will answered, blood trickling from his nose. They offer evolution through assimilation. If humanity simultaneously accepts and rejects this offer, embraces the technology while refusing the entities, it creates a logical loop they cannot process. Natalie understood first. We need to broadcast a choice to everyone. A collective decision. Emergency systems worldwide transmitted the message. Every human was asked to make a conscious choice. Accept the advanced technology and knowledge, but reject the entity's control. Embrace evolution on humanity's terms. As millions made this choice, the reality engines pulsed with new energy. The shields changed color, now glowing with a warm golden light. In orbit, the entity's forms began to destabilize. Their geometric shapes twisted and folded in upon themselves. The horizon froze in space, caught between commands. It's working, Alan whispered. The entities tried to retreat, but the modified reality engines locked onto them, forcing the paradox into their consciousness. One by one, they collapsed into swirling vortices before disappearing. When the last entity vanished, the horizon drifted powerless. Inside the command center, Carolyn, Roy, and Will opened their eyes. Normal human eyes. The blue light gone. They're gone, Carolyn said weakly. But they left something behind. In labs worldwide, the reality engines remained functional but transformed. They no longer connected to other dimensions, but worked solely in our universe. The technology remained, purified of its dangerous purpose. 1 month later, Natalie stood with Alan on a hilltop, watching the new Earth Defense Fleet prepare for its first mission. The ships carried modified reality engines that would allow them to explore the galaxy at speeds never before possible. We'll reach the stars, Alan said, but this time on our terms. And we'll be ready if we meet anything else out there, Natalie added. Above them, The stars shone in a sky no longer distorted by interdimensional rifts. Humanity had faced its greatest threat and emerged stronger, wiser, and truly ready to take its place in the universe.